On this episode of Still Loading, gotta catch 'em all. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval, and today I have an esteemed panel with me to discuss one of the most important gaming franchises in the history of games. This has been a long time coming. I've been wanting to do an episode on this for quite some time. We are here today talking about Pokemon Gen 1. Pokemon Generation 1, which is Pokemon Red and Blue, and Yellow, of course. Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow. And man, what a series. And with me today to talk about this, let's kick it off with the man from overseas, Mono from Tokyo Game Life. Mono, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm really happy to be here again and chatting about Pokemon.
I'm happy to have you back on. I was looking forward to getting you back on the show. Just like, I had you on for an interview, so I'm always looking to find other ways to get previous interviewees back on the show to talk about things that they love. And I know you're a huge Pokemon fan, so I thought this was the perfect time to get you back on. Now, the other guest with us today, he is a hero, ladies and gentlemen. The other guest who was going to make it on, unfortunately, could not make it last minute, had some really unfortunate circumstances. That is Jared from the Play Along podcast. Shout out to Jared. I will get you back on for another episode, I promise. But like a goddamn hero who showed up in the middle of the night, rode through a full moon on I was going to say a galleon. That's not a horse. That's a ship. A stallion. That's the word I was trying to think of. Bill from the Gaming and Collecting podcast. Bill, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on again, dude.
No problem, man. And Bill, I mean, you were coming back on this. The time this episode's coming out, you had your first you were on my podcast for the first time for the Final Fantasy VIII episode, and so less than a month and you're already back on. So listeners, get used to this. He's going to be on again probably at some point that I will that I won't know just yet, because he like I said, he stepped up with literally 20 minutes notice. It's just wild. But here we are today to talk about Pokemon Generation 1, Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow, the first games in the Pokemon series. And if you're from Japan, it's Pokemon Red and Green, and eventually later Blue. But we'll get into all that. So to kick this off, I want to hear from both of you. How did you first get into Pokemon? What generation did you start with? Was it Gen 1? Was it a different gen? Bill, let's start off with you, since I started with Mono with the intros. Let's start off with you for just memory. So what is your earliest memories of Pokemon? How did you get into the series?
So my first memory of Pokemon is actually kind of funny. It actually wasn't the games itself. It was actually the anime adaptation, which was extremely popular at the time. So I actually, we used to travel a lot back in I guess this was the late 90s, early 2000s. And we actually had this portable car VHS player. Yes, a VHS player that was portable for in the car. I remember it because it came with this, a couple VHSs. Two of them are these educational things that me and Alex, my sister, didn't care about. The other was this Pokemon VHS, which had 3 episodes. It was, the fighting one with Mankey, the one where he catches Muck, and then the Diglett episode. And I think we watched that on repeat the entire car ride. Probably drove my parents nuts. But yeah, it was after that we were hooked. And I don't think I wouldn't get a game right away though. The first game I actually got was Pokemon Sapphire shortly after, and then my first introduction to Gen 1 was actually with the remake Leaf Green.
Okay. So it was on the remake was your first introduction to the games then. Okay.
Yes.
So Mona, what about you? What is your introduction to the Pokemon series?
I have a pretty odd introduction to Pokemon because I very vividly remember the first time I ever saw any sort of Pokemon. I don't know if kids still have this, but back in the day, you would need to have book covers on your textbooks so they wouldn't get
Oh, I
scratched
remember
up.
that.
And my school, they would get like a bunch of book covers every now and then. And we would take it and then wrap our books with it. And for whatever reason, they had a Pokemon book cover. It was really just a white piece of paper with the Pokemon on
Mm,
front and then like the word Pokemon. I believe it was like an advertisement for the anime because it aired about the same time the game launched. But this was my
okay.
first time ever seeing Pokemon, and I was really transfixed by these creatures on this book cover, and my friends were as well. So it's kind of an odd thing to be introduced to a major franchise is through a book cover. But that's how I first discovered Pokemon. And at this time, I was pretty aware of gaming news. This was right about the time when I started to read gaming magazines. So I started to understand okay, games come out on a specific day. And I knew Pokemon was coming out in September. So I asked for it for Christmas 1998. And on Christmas morning, I opened up my presents, and one of them was Pokemon Blue. And everything changed after that.
Okay, okay, I like it. For myself, my own introduction to the series, I don't have quite as vivid a memory as both of you do. For myself, from what I remember, I think I was introduced to the cards first. I remember, the cards being a huge phenomena
Hmm.
in elementary school. So it. Yeah, it got, as it did with Yu-Gi-Oh later on, eventually you weren't allowed to bring them to school because kids kept stealing them from each other. Just rampant theft among elementary school kids involving Pokemon cards. So I remember a lot of kids would have those, and I think I got into the cartoon a little bit later, and then my some of my friends at church had a Game Boy and Pokemon, and I did not have a Game Boy. And oh my gosh, I was obsessed with it. I wouldn't. It was one of those things. You know how like you would have that friend that would have a game console that you didn't have, and the only
Hmm.
reason you wanted to go over to their house was to play the game, not actually see them.
Yeah, that was like me with like my friends who had N64s and GameCubes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was pretty much me with anyone who had a Game Boy and Pokemon. I didn't care who. I didn't give a shit about you. I just wanted to catch a goddamn Pikachu or something like that. I just wanted to catch them all. So I was obsessed with those games. And I didn't really get to play the games a whole lot as a kid initially because I didn't have a Game Boy until literally years later, where I forget how I even got one. I think I got a Game Boy pretty late, and I got it from someone else, and that's when I finally could play it through all on my own without anyone. I think the only other time I was able to do it is because I got Pokemon Stadium for the N64, and that had the Game Boy pack that you could play Game Boy Red and Blue on like an emulator through the N64 or something like that, but only through
Hmm.
Pokemon Stadium. That's how I actually played most of the original game. Now, for my personal experience with Pokemon, I kind of did a really brief overview of like, Pokemon cards to the anime somewhere mixed in there and eventually into the games. My experience with the Pokemon cards is super strange because my parents so my parents are very religious. They still are, but they've lightened some of the rules. And some of you listeners may know this where this is going already. But Pokemon Evolve,
Yeah.
you have different evolutions. That was a no-no for my parents. That you can't. It's evolution. You can't. Ooh, no, never. They would never call it like that's Satan or something like that. But they were very much against it because of the evolution thing. Uh, my mom specifically, I think, ate into a lot of religious propaganda at the time. She thought, Dungeons and Dragons was witchcraft and wizardry up until like probably like 10 years ago. I'm not trying to make fun of her. I love my mother dearly, but it's just one of those things where that stuff really worked on her. And because of that, I was like, they were really, really hesitant about Pokemon. So the way I got around it, because they never said that I couldn't have the cards, they just said, we're not going to buy you any. Um, so do you guys remember Lunchables?
Hmm.
Yes, of course.
Do you remember that Lunchables had a promotional thing? They had their own little cardboard cutouts of Pokemon cards. Do you remember this?
Oh, but yeah, I think I do, but they weren't like the like Wizards of the Coast type of trading cards. They were
They
just like
were
a
not.
picture.
Yep, they were not.
Oh,
They were very bare
I
bones basics.
I
Were you going to
might
say something, Bill?
I might have some of these somewhere.
Oh my god.
I have to look this up because I might have some hidden away somewhere.
Well, I convinced. I don't remember who. I feel kind of bad now because I don't know if they did this begrudgingly because they were being nice and I was I was probably begging them. I traded them like 8 of those little things for one Pokemon card. And I forget what it was. It might have been a Machop or something like that. It was I and I just it was like I had the holy grail in my hands. I'm like, I finally have one. I have a Pokemon card, guys. And I traded a bunch of those like Lunchables things. I'm like, well, they're not real Pokemon cards, but if I give you like 8 of them, that'll count, right? And they go, yeah, sure. So I traded like a bunch of them for one card. And then I ended up getting a bunch of I would like I would literally just mooch off of people. I did the same thing with Yu-Gi-Oh for a little bit. I'd be like, "Do you have any cards you just don't care about?" And eventually people were like, "Yeah, you can have this one." And then I would get a whole bunch and then I would trade a bunch of them for like one really good card. And I definitely did that with Yu-Gi-Oh. I don't know if I did that with Pokemon.
I definitely did
Um,
that with Yu-Gi-Oh.
I built a whole deck that way. I actually got a pretty good deck doing that. I would just ask people for like cards they didn't want and then trade up that way. It was crazy. And the last memory I have of like vividly of Pokemon, there's two. Not the last, but the last that I'm going to share at least right now, so we can get into the actual discussion of the game and history around this of these first couple games. Um, I remember going to a local card store and buying Kazan. No, sorry, there's Kadabra. It was Kadabra.
Hmm.
Buying Kadabra from them, but I was a stupid kid and didn't realize this was a collectible store, not like an individual pack. So I spent I convinced my parents to spend $5 on a single card for a Kadabra. And I remember being like, I feel so dumb. I could have bought a pack for that. I could have gotten 8 cards in a pack for that. I don't know why. I think I just really liked Abracadabra and Alakazam, that whole evolution chain. So I was really fixated on it, but I still don't know why I did that. And then the other thing I remember was when they brought the Pokemon cartoon over here to North America, they only localized, like, there was chunks of how many episodes they had localized. And I still have I've seen episodes past this, but never in the proper order. If you follow the original Pokemon cartoon up until I want to say Charmander turns into Charmeleon,
Mm-hmm.
the episodes just stopped there. It was like maybe it was either that or episode or the next episode after that. I'm pretty sure it was the episode where Charmander evolves into Charmeleon, and it would just reset. They would just reset back to the first episode of Pokemon with Ashton getting Pikachu and riding through the thunderstorm and all that other stuff. And I would get so fucking mad because I would watch it over again. I'm like, all right, maybe this time it'll get past this episode. And I remember we went through that whole thing like 4 times and it never came. And if you think about it, I don't know how many episodes in, that might have been only really 4 months, but as a kid, that felt like forever.
That sounds a lot like Dragon Ball Z back when
Right.
when they switched from the Ocean cast to the Funimation cast, and it used to just reset to the beginning of the Saiyan saga every single time.
I I think I remember that too. That was a big thing as well. It took forever to get past the Frieza saga for a long while. And it just oh man. So that's my own personal recollection with Pokemon, but I'm so excited to dive into this game with both of you. I wanted to start off real quick with just some bare bones so just not I shouldn't say bare bones, but just some background information on the game itself, like who developed it, who, like, the creator of it. And Bill, you probably know a lot of this already because I know you do a lot of research. Mono, I don't know how much you know or don't know how much you've researched. So for both of you guys, if you've heard all of this already, I apologize. Feel free to interject and jump in to clarify anything or add anything. But Pokemon is developed by Game Freak. It was created by Satoshi Tajiri, and the artist for it was Ken Sugimori, right?
Yes.
Mori, I should say, Ken Sugimori. And oh my gosh, who's the composer? Do you guys remember the composer off the top of your heads?
Masuda did some work for the sound design. The composer, off the top of my head, hold on.
I will double check on that really quick because he's Junichi Masuda. That's it.
Yeah.
Yep. Junichi Masuda is the composer for the games. Now it is. I wasn't sure if this was apocryphal or not, but I've seen in enough interviews doing research for this. The big inspiration for Pokemon was bug catching. As a kid, Satoshi would collect bugs and trade them with his friends, and that was kind of like the earliest inspiration for the game. And as obviously Satoshi got older, he got into video games, and he actually started his own gaming magazine, his own gaming publication called Game Freak, and that's where they got the name of their development company. And they would actually go around and interview arcade owners and get tips for playing popular arcade games. And they published it for a number of years. They started it in 1983, and then they obviously used it for the creation of their dev team, or their developer, or their company name, excuse me. And the first game they made as a developer was called Quinty, but in North America, it was known as Mendel Palace. So the first Game Freak game actually came out here in North America it was published by Hudson Soft, and it's just called Mendel Palace. And it's a puzzle game. Have either of you guys played Mendel Palace?
No. I have played it a little bit. Not super experienced. I probably played it a bit on the emulator maybe years ago because, yeah, it's the first Game Freak game. So I kind of wanted to have a bit of background knowledge on it. But it is sort of like a puzzle game. And Game Freak, even before Pokemon, that is what made them worldwide famous. But they have a pretty illustrious career even before Pokemon. They developed Yoshi for NES, the puzzle game, which is a game I quite like. And also the Japan-only Mario and Wario game, which is another puzzle game. And it's unique in that it uses the Super Famicom mouse. So you kind of control the game through the, not traditional controls. And they also have Pulseman. So they were a pretty well-established, I don't want to say indie developer, but sort of a small, but, worthwhile and well-regarded developer in Japan. They already had connections with Nintendo and Sega before they broke out huge with Pokemon.
And you could play Pulseman, I believe, in Europe. I believe that got a physical release over in Europe. It never actually came out in North America, except I want to say
on Sega Channel.
Yeah, I was about to say on the Sega Channel. I actually do have this game, not a physical copy of it. You can get like fan made ROM hack, not ROM hacks, but like a fan made boot, not repro. That's the word I'm looking for.
Reproduction.
Yeah, fan made repro for the Sega Genesis. If you want to, I actually got it for the Wii before the Wii shop closed, so I can play it on my Wii if I really want to. Yeah, and development for Pokemon actually started back in 1989. Like that's when the idea was first kind of born, and it had a hellishly long development cycle. Like 6 years is a long time for now. It's especially long back then when they could get the Final Fantasy games were coming out year after year at one point until they got to Super Nintendo, and then it was like every 2 years or whatever. So 6 years is crazy long, especially for what would end up being a Game Boy game. One of the earliest ideas for it was the link cable. They wanted to include the link cable from an early standpoint. Like I was reading an interview with Sugimori, and he was talking about how that they wanted the link cable included, and the idea was that the player could battle with kaiju, Godzilla-esque creatures, and they wanted to be able to battle with kaiju. And then they kind of switched it up eventually where they didn't want you to battle like they didn't want the monsters battling against you. They wanted them to battle with you, which is kind of where the twist into Pokemon started. But before they did that, Sugimori did a lot of artwork for these kaiju that never came to being, and two of them actually ended up in the final game in Pokemon. Rhydon and Nidoking were some of the kaiju that Sugimori designed initially, which I think is kind of cool that
Hmm.
there are some Pokemon that survived from the earliest development stages before they even knew it was going to be Pokemon.
Rhydon is technically maybe you could consider him to be the first Pokemon because he is the first Pokemon programmed into the game. And in the game
Mm.
code, he's like number one. So, like a common joke amongst Pokemon fans is, oh, who is the first Pokemon? Is it Bulbasaur? Is it Arceus? Is it Mew? Or is it Rhydon? Because all of them have like a good claim to being the very first Pokemon.
I like that. I did not know. I know what I totally forgot to say at the top. My relationship to Pokemon is so bizarre because I've said it on other podcasts. I've probably said it on my own here. But just to reiterate, my history with the games, like after getting into it, I played Gen 1 to hell and back, specifically Red and Blue. But then I didn't really touch the series until again, I didn't play another Pokemon game again until not almost, over a decade later, with X and Y. So I missed all of the gens in between. I did try Gold and Silver, which I know is a lot of people's favorite. For some reason, as a kid, it was too overwhelming for me. The day and night, the fact that you had to set like what time and day and night it was, which I didn't, as an adult now, I'm like, oh, you're trying to immerse you more, just kind of like what they do in Animal Crossing. There's a day and night time. But as a kid, I'm like, well, what if I set it to the wrong time? If I set it to this time, am I going to miss something? Like it just tweaked my anxiety so bad.
Mm.
And I just, I do. And then also the fact that Pokemon could hold items in this, like little, like fruits or whatever to help them heal if they needed to, in their pockets, right? I think that's what it
Mhm.
is. Um, it for some reason it just tweaked an anxiety. So I tried Gold and Silver and it was just too much for me. And I still haven't really given it a serious shot. And ever since then, now if it's anything past the 151, I'm like, there's too much. I can't handle this. There's too many different Pokemon. Like I have my knowledge of Pokemon after 151 is fucking abysmal. It's like zero. Um anyway, so yeah, I just had to get that out there because I almost laugh at myself. I really need to seriously try, seriously need to sit down and play the other games. And I think before I do an episode on Gen 2, I will go through and play through Gold or Silver. In your guys' opinion, do you have a preference between Gold or Silver? I know they're basically the same,
Well,
and we'll get into
if you're
that. But
gonna play that one, you might as well play Crystal because it's just the complete game.
Right. It is like the third version. So it has a lot of additional content, but still a lot of the things from the original game as well.
oh, well, good thing I have Crystal then. I actually, fun story. I have the first. How many do I have? I have both Gen 1 and Gen 2 complete in the box.
Oh,
Uh,
you could pay off a mortgage with that.
seriously. Well, I lucked into it. So I owned a lot of the cartridges beforehand. I owned red, blue, yellow, gold, and silver. And I did buy so what is it? I had red already. I needed blue, gold, blue, gold, silver, and yellow. And I found an eBay listing for it. This was before the game market exploded in 2020. I want to say this happened
Mhm.
in like 2014. I bought this
Oh, that was the
maybe
golden days
2013.
right there.
I paid $50 for those games. I paid
Yep.
$50 for, and I actually even double checked, after I started learning about, oh, what if it's a counterfeit? Because Pokemon games are like
Easily
the
counterfeitable.
yeah. Oh, and the outside of mine look a little wonky, but I opened them up and like the numbers match. So I think if the at worst maybe they replaced the outer shells, but I have no idea. They seem legit though. Either way, they play, so that's the important thing. But then I got all the boxes and manuals. A friend of mine at my job came up to me. He's like, "Hey, so I found a bunch of like game boxes and manuals. Do you want them?" And he brought them up to me, and they were all the Pokemon ones that I had the cartridges for. And I said, "You don't want money for this?" He's like, "No, I know you collect." And I go, "This is worth a lot of money." He goes, "Yeah, it's fine." Okay. So I have all of the Gen 1 and Gen 2. The only one I still needed was Pokemon Crystal. I didn't have the cartridge for that, and I paid $30 for that cartridge, which
What a
was a good
wonderful
deal.
time. What a wonderful time that was.
I paid 30 for Crystal, though, not that. It was like 2019, maybe.
Yeah,
It
that sounds about right.
it wasn't that long ago. Anyway, I'm going down a rabbit hole with all this. So yeah, it's like I said, it started out as a kaiju game, and then they kind of turned it into Pokemon. They designed over 300 Pokemon originally between 6 and 7. There were 6 and 7 different designers, and they whittled it down to the original 151 as we know it now. It was originally going to be called Capsule Monsters. I don't know exactly why they decided to change the name, but I like I like Pocket Monsters or Pokemon a lot better than Capsule Monsters. And the final thing that I really had written down here that I wanted to go into before we kind of talk about the game itself was uh, the reason why there's multiple versions, why you have, they split it up into 2 different cartridges and then eventually a third, was actually Miyamoto. Miyamoto, when he was in meetings with everyone, or when they were like working on pitching it, he's the one that proposed the idea. And at first I was like, okay, it was Miyamoto who said that in an interview. So I'm like, he's not normally the type to like take credit for things that aren't his, but it is also still coming from his mouth. Like is he inflating it a little bit, like that kind of thing. But found another interview with Sugimori, and he confirmed it. Maybe not Sugimori, but someone else, and they confirmed it as well. So Miyamoto is why we have multiple cartridges. You can thank Miyamoto for that.
That sounds like a Miyamoto idea, to be honest.
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
quite a big proponent of the Pokemon idea because it is an ambitious game, especially for the hardware. But Miyamoto was one who was really supportive of Game Freak putting this on the Game Boy.
And it shows because like Nintendo has supported Pokemon. Well, they own like a third of Pokemon. Actually, we should talk about who owns Pokemon. Like who owns the rights, the IP of Pokemon. It is one of the weirdest like hierarchies I've ever seen. Have you guys ever looked into this?
Well, because there's the Pokemon Company, there's Creatures Inc., there's Game Freak, there's Nintendo. There's a lot of people involved.
Yep.
Yes, it's quite complicated, and even I can't really explain it, everything. But the main idea is technically 3 companies own Pokemon. There's Game Freak, the developer, Nintendo, the publisher, and Creatures Inc., who co-developed the original game, and they are actually Ape Inc., who you might know from the Earthbound creators. And ironically, yes, Ape Inc. was created by Shigesato Itoi, who is the creator of Earthbound, but he's also famous for many other aspects as well. He's a famous copywriter and author in Japan. So it's kind of funny that Shigesato Itoi, especially Earthbound, has quite a strong connection to Pokemon, which a lot of people don't think about. But if you play Earthbound and play Pokemon, there's definitely a lot of similar ideas, and the atmosphere is, not too distant from each other. And Nintendo created the Pokemon Company to kind of handle all the Pokemon dealings because they get a lot of money, not just from games, but from the anime, from merchandise. So Nintendo doesn't want to handle all of that. So they put the Pokemon Company as like this, not a shell company, but this third party to kind of handle general Pokemon things. And in terms of like who owns what, I know Nintendo owns like the names of the Pokemon. They own like the copyright for Pikachu, but maybe Game Freak owns like something else, and then like Creatures also owns whatever. Now
Creatures does Creatures does the card game, I believe.
Yes, that's like their main focus. So they all have like a different piece of the pie. I always think of it like Seinfeld. If you remember the Seinfeld episode where Jerry jokes about the submarine, where you need 2 keys in the submarine to operate it. I think Pokemon is kind of like that, where all 3 companies need to like put their keys in the submarine together if they want to do something. But I think the
That's a
Pokemon Company has more authority in terms of like, okay, I want to make this plushie. Oh, I want to put like this app on this smartphone. So it's a very weird and nebulous relationship.
Yeah.
That's a good way to look at it because in doing a little bit of research, there is who is it? Game Informer had back in 2018 released an article on the history of Pokemon, and that's where I got some of my info. The other part was schmupulations.com for those who want to see some Japanese translated interviews. That's a good website to go to, or interviews with Japanese game devs translated into English. That's a good website to go to. And from what I was reading is that like you said, Mono, the Pokemon Company manages the brand. They manage every aspect of Pokemon. The owners of the Pokemon Company are a three-way tie. They each own 33.3 repeating percent of the company, and they are Nintendo, Creatures Inc., and Game Freak. So it's this bizarre amalgamation of three, like just so many hands in the pie. And they even kind of talk about I think it's Matsuda who describes it in the Game Informer article about how it's kind of all broken down. And he basically it it kind of makes sense what you were saying, that Nintendo the company owns the copyright to Pikachu, but maybe some other Pokemon are owned by some of the other like other not subsidiaries, one of the other three companies. It seems like everything's just split up in this bizarre thing. So your description from using Seinfeld as the example is perfect. All three companies have to turn the key to do anything because they all own a third of it. It's such a weird mixture to this whole thing. I don't know. It's just strange.
Hmm.
So I think this is a good time though to jump into the game itself. I think we've gone for 30 minutes now, kind of explaining some of the backstory, and I still can't get over this stupid hierarchy of the Pokemon Company. It's so goofy. But like what is Pokemon? What is Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow? Anyone want to jump in and just kind of do some basic descriptions of what this game is?
I mean, I guess to put it in the simplest way, it is essentially a very basic turn-based role-playing game, and it is one of probably the earliest examples of, I guess, what's now known as the Mon style RPG, where you have to capture your party members essentially to assist you in combat as it would go. That's like a really basic way of looking at it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think what makes Pokemon so fun is that, I mean, the big focal point is you got to catch them all. You don't have to, but the idea is to capture as many Pokemon as you possibly can. And you play as, well, I always named my character Ash because I was obsessed with the Pokemon TV show. But obviously you can name your character whatever you want. You are given a Pokemon by your local professor, which in this game is Professor Oak.
Mm-hmm.
And you go off on an adventure. And I find one of my favorite discourses online is just talking about the logistics of the Pokemon universe. A bunch of 10-year-olds are just wandering around the world on their own.
I think the game
monsters.
I think in the game they were technically like 11 or 12, but not that makes much of a difference.
No, it really doesn't help their case all that much. But you go around, you collect badges, so that way you can prove that you are leveling up your creatures effectively. And then once you get 8 badges, you fight against the Pokemon League, and that's to show show how strong you've gotten. And I don't know, from my understanding in this series in general, there's not a whole lot of overall story. There's definitely not much of a story in this game.
Not in Gen
right?
1. You get to Gen 5 and it's like, will they please be quiet? Well, actually Gen 5 had a good story. It's more some of the newer ones, it's like I just don't care.
What about you, Mona? What are your takes on the story?
Yeah, especially in Gen 1, the story is pretty straightforward. You're trying to collect all the badges, and you coincidentally also overthrow like a criminal organization on the
Yes.
way there. But yeah, typically Pokemon doesn't really excel in terms of storytelling. But what I would say it excels at is world building. because all
Yes.
of the worlds feel really authentic and unique. I think we'll get into it probably later, but every city in especially Gen 1 feels very distinct and it has its own atmosphere and things to do. And there is like a sort of a backstory about, what else is happening in this Pokemon world that doesn't really affect the main character. Of course, there's like the creation of Mewtwo, and this is hinted towards like the burned mansion on Cinnabar Island and the
Hmm.
diary entries. And then eventually you do encounter Mewtwo, which then ties in with like the mystery of Mew, which is, one of the greatest mysteries of the game. And this is something that you see in a lot of the other future Pokemon games as well, where the story is basically the same formula where I'm getting badges and I'm toppling some terrible criminal organization. But each world has its own sort of lore and mystery and secrets to discover. And I think that is what people connect with in terms of the
Yeah.
Pokemon story.
It wasn't really until Gen 5 where the stories actually started feeling like full on developed stories. Because
Mm.
I think before that, the most developed story was probably Gold and Silver. And even then, it's still a very basic plot.
What I think, Mono, you hit the nail on the head with the world building comment, because the fact that, you like Team Rocket in this game I find so much more interesting than they are in the TV show, because they have that whole secret gambling den in is it Cerulean City? No,
Celadon City.
Celadon.
Celadon City. Sorry, Cerulean City is the second city with Misty. Uh,
Hmm.
Celadon City, yeah, Celadon City, and because that is the fourth gym, if I remember correctly, right? In
Yes.
Celadon, that's with Erica. I can't believe legit. So I've beaten this game numerous times. I did not replay it for this episode because I've played it so much as a kid that I I have it down. Like, I know how to use the missing no glitch without having to look it up anymore. Um, all that stuff. Though I forget which item slot you have to. I think it's number 7 or something like that. It's like, to duplicate an item, to find missing no, you have to like have a specific item in like the 7th slot, or I forget, it's a certain number slot. I forget which number slot it is. Anyway, we'll go into the missing no glitch when we kind of talk about. I think we can lump that in with Mew, since that's all kind of glitches and missed, like, the playground, the schoolyard rumors, which we'll get into at the end
Hmm.
of the towards the end of the episode. But I love how in Celadon City, how you take down, like, there's this gambling center, this little, I think it's supposed to represent like a pachinko parlor, isn't it? Like, but I don't think do they have
Yeah.
pachinko in there?
There might be there, but it's changed over to like slot machines for America. Well, actually, it's probably slot machines in the Japanese version too. Now that I think about it.
I Mona, have you ever played the Japanese version or not? Only the North American one.
I have played it a bit. I think it is like the same where I'm trying to remember because they've changed it so many times. So my memory gets a bit fuzzy because it is like a slot machine. And it's also Voltorb Flip in the Heart Gold Soul Silver
Hmm.
remake, a game I really like. But I think the original one is really just like you're matching up the three like Pokemon graphics and trying to get that
Mm,
Porygon. But this was cut out, I think, because especially in Europe, they don't like any sort of gambling for children's games. So they've really reduced that type of element in future games. But I really
Hmm.
loved it in the original.
I did too. I've never been a fan of gambling elements in games, not for any moral reason. They just always bored me, because it's like, well, nothing I do, like, I can't. There's no skill in this. It's just all blind luck. So I'm just wasting my time with this. I'm not really getting enough out of it. But with to get back to the world building, just the fact that you would have Team Rocket in Celadon City, and you can literally just take out their whole base. But then how each city, I think, once again, you said each city had its own personality, and you're 100% right, because Celadon had the department stores, the big giant department stores, and then Vermilion City had the docks where you could get on the SS Anne. And then Cinnabar Island obviously was an island, but I forget what was the city with Koga as the gym leader. It was the poison gym?
Uh,
Fuchsia
Fuchsia.
City.
Fuchsia
Yeah,
City. Yep.
I forget what their whole thing was, but um that was because that was the fifth gym, and the sixth gym is Sabrina's gym. I'm also forgetting the name of that city.
Saffron City.
Saffron.
Thank you. This is why I had you guys on. You're gonna pick up the where I'm dropping. Oh my god! Pick up the ball where I'm dropping it. I can't speak tonight. But in Saffron City, I also love that Team Rocket kind of has its own thing there again, if I remember correctly. But that city was huge, and fighting Sabrina was like trying to get to Sabrina. I remember was a chore in and of itself.
Oh, the teleporter rooms.
Yep. I used to have like a pattern for it memorized, but it's been too long since then. I think what I want to kind of go into though next is just what are some personal highlights for each of you in this game? Like what are some things that you really gravitate towards and you find yourself wanting to go back to and play, like one of the reasons you go back to play this game whenever you do go back to play it. Mono, let's start off with you. What is something that you kind of like? What's one of your favorite aspects of these games here?
I think one thing that really stands the test of time is the design of Kanto. It's very dense, but also a bit unexpected in how you traverse it. Especially modern Pokemon games, you really just go in a circle. And Kanto, you also kind of go in a circle a bit, but there's a bit more unorthodox and unexpected events that happen that kind of push you somewhere else. For example, after you get your first 2 gym badges, you think, okay, well, next I'm going to Celadon City because it's like the closest on the map.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, because the Diglets are causing problems, so they caved in like the tunnel, or you have to navigate all the way to Vermilion City. So even though it doesn't look like, well, I'm supposed to go this way, but actually I'm being redirected to another place. That's type of unexpected, and also that ties in with the world building, where actually Pokemon are affecting this world, so it's causing you as a character to change your path and change your not motivations, but you're taking a detour because of the Pokemon, which is very clever, I think. And a lot of the places have their own thing, like you talked about before. Celadon City has the huge department store, has the game center. Saffron City has the 2 gyms, which is unique for the game, where you have the fighting gym.
Oh
And you have
yeah.
the real psychic gym. And that also ties in with the world building, where, of course, the psychic gym is stronger because of the type advantage. They could easily crush the fighting type. And then in Saffron City, you have Silphco, which is where they make all the Pokeballs, and that's being taken over by Team Rocket. And you go on this very elaborate, very elongated, like dungeon crawl inside this modern skyscraper, which is another interesting thing about this game is that it takes place in modern day, opposed to a lot of traditional JRPGs.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of you raiding a castle or some like a cave, you're in a modern building, a modern skyscraper, which is very interesting. And I always think of Silphco as something that is what Pokemon is good at and also kind of what they've strayed away from. I still like a lot of modern Pokemon games, so I don't want to like bash them. But Pokemon Gen 1 especially, it has some of the best dungeon designs in the series. For example, Silphco, it's 11 floors, which is pretty ridiculous.
Wow.
And
Really?
on these floors, there's teleporters, there's those, I forget the name, but like the tiles where you spin and like the arrow tiles that push you like up in here and up over there. A lot of people think these are frustrating, and they kind of are, but it's also fun when you clear them. So it has this one dungeon has these puzzles like the tiles and the teleporters. It has all these items that you can discover, all these like optional and secret rooms, and it's filled with a ton of enemies. I want to say there's like maybe like 20 or 30 like Team Rocket grunts. And you don't have to fight all of them, but there's a lot there. And then the final battle, you're in like this office of the president and you fight Giovanni, and which is like a pretty tough battle because he has a lot of different diverse Pokemon. And this is also foreshadowing, the final gym battle. And when you clear the Silphco dungeon, you get Lapras, which is a unique Pokemon. You can only get there. You get the Master Ball, which is one of the most unique and impressive items and useful items in the game. And all this is from a mid-game dungeon. This is not the final dungeon. It's just something from like the halfway point. But it's so elaborate and you're so rewarded for clearing it. This really evokes what makes this game special is that every single piece of the map is so iconic. Like you mentioned before, you can remember the names pretty clearly. And even though I would say I probably like Generation 2 more than Generation 1, but I can remember every place in Generation 1 more clearly than Generation 2 because maybe just I was the right age when I played it and I played it so many times that it just kind of burned itself into my memory. But I think there is something in terms of like the design of the world that is really clever and really creative that makes people remember it all these years later. So I think out of everything in Gen 1, I think the world design is maybe its strongest point.
I also think that it probably helps that the Pokemon cartoon was going on at the same time. And
Mm.
so like when you watch the cartoon and you see Ash go to Pewter City and fight Brock as the gym leader there, and then you go to Cerulean City, even though you don't find out you've already met Misty in the cartoon before then, but you find out she's the gym leader there.
Mm-hmm.
It and then you go into the game and you're like, holy shit, I'm fighting Brock just like in the cartoon. Oh my gosh, I went through Mount Moon and now I'm fighting Misty. And it was just crazy because the the way that the game and the show aligned really well with that from my memory. I could be completely misremembering how the show went because the show came out after the game, obviously.
Yes.
But Pokemon Yellow, as kind of like the third game in this gen, was a direct response to the cartoon, which is why instead of being able to choose between Squirtle, Bulbasaur, and Charmander, you just get Pikachu, and Pikachu kind of follows you around. But it still felt, I think that helped, that definitely aided, at least for me, with remembering a lot of the places because you could reference it back with the cartoon. And Bill, before I throw it over to you, I can't believe I didn't ask this at the top of the show. What's your starter? What both of you, what's your starter for this? Mona will go with you first and then Bill give yours and you can go into some of your favorite elements of the game. So Mona, what was your starter?
I picked Bulbasaur because, well, he's number one. So he's number one for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
That's because he's the best. And I really
Boo.
liked, I really like frogs. So he's the most frog-like. So I picked him, and I've been a Bulbasaur diehard ever since.
All right, I'll actually go next real quick because I told you, Bill, we'd end off with you and you can go into your favorite elements. For me, it's Squirtle. Which I know Bulbasaur would kick Squirtle's ass based off the types
Type
here,
advantage.
type advantage. But you know what? My strategy always was pick Squirtle, which destroys Brock and everything in Mount Moon. And then in Mount Moon, you get Mega Punch, and you just Mega Punch the shit out of everything. That is, and it I would literally one shot boss Pokemon like
Mm-hmm.
the gym leader's Pokemon with Mega Punch. It was wonderful. Anyway, Bill, so what was your starter? And then go ahead and dive into some of your favorite elements.
So my starter was also Bulbasaur because
God
grass
damn it.
because grass types for the win. But
Yeah.
also in Bulbasaur late game in Gen 1, Razor Leaf always criticals. So but besides that, so I think when it comes to Pokemon, like especially Gen 1, one of my favorite things is like we had said earlier, the world building. Like just talking to all the NPCs in this game is like some of the most entertaining dialogue you will find in like an RPG. Like that's actually kind of like kept up with like every game in the series. Like in every starter town, there's always like the one like NPC who just talks about technology and how like the world is always impressing them. You can go around. One thing I found really interesting is the first gym you actually run into in this game is the last gym, the one that you're going to get to like at the end of the game, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like oh, that's weird. When am I going to visit this gym? And it's like, psych, it's the last gym you're gonna run to. And guess who the gym leader is? There's stuff like that. I love the
gym's
trainer.
Closed.
Yeah. I love the trainer dialogue where like the trainer, some of the stuff they say is like freaking ridiculous. Like the shorts boy who's like, hey, you've got nice shorts. So do I. Let's fight. Like just because some of the goofy shit. Actually one of my favorite characters you run into is
on the bike trail.
The bike trail. There's the Team Rocket grunt that speaks in broken English that you can run into, who is actually later referenced in Gen 5 because Gen 5 takes place in pseudo America, and it's implied that he's actually an American and he can't speak Japanese very well. That's why he speaks in like a broken English, and it's kind of a cool callback later on. There's just all sorts of cool
Hmm.
stuff like that.
For me, it was, I think, to kind of go into I agree. I think for me, my favorite aspect was all the individual Pokemon. I loved how creative all the designs were, and I do agree the world building is fantastic. Like I think what you said, Mono, is probably it's up there for me as well. The world building is just so strong, but for me, it was the Pokemon because I loved seeing all like I don't know. It was the sense of discovery of seeing a Pokemon that I never saw before, and I think the world building helped with that because it was always fun to go to a new location, see what types of Pokemon were there. And in all honesty, the only other thing that has given me that same sensation, that same sense of like discovery in terms of a Pokemon game was Pokemon Go. And I want to do an episode on Pokemon Go at some point because that was a massive thing back in 2016. Um, and still is popular. Not trying to say it isn't, but it was like everywhere in 2016. Anyway, but the individual Pokemon just really captured my imagination, and every time I would go to a new place, it'd be like, okay, what's a new Pokemon that I haven't seen before, and it was always fun to kind of discover. It kind of reminds me like in Pokemon Snap, like when you would go play a new level and you would take pictures. What Pokemon am I going to see on this course? It was kind of like that same sensation, but much more spread out. Obviously, like I can still remember specific locations of Pokemon because like once you've played enough time. So for example, above Cerulean City when you go to Bill to get the PC. Um, Bill, you make a cameo in the game. How about that?
Oh, that's the
Uh,
funniest thing because whenever you go into the PC, you have someone's PC and then your name. So mine was always Bill's PC and then Bill's PC. That didn't get confusing.
Not at all. um, but on sorry, that's really making me laugh. When you go up the bridge, you fight all those trainers, and like congratulations, you've fought all of our contestants or whatever. I forget what exactly it's called. That bridge there leading
Oh,
up
the
to
Nugget
Bill's
Bridge.
place. The Nugget Bridge, yes, and you get the golden nugget. If you go off to the left and you walk down the tall grass on the left-hand side of there, where it kind of like you go up to the left, and it's kind of close to where Mewtwo's cave is, if I remember correctly. You can get Abras in there at a really
Mhm.
low level. They're borderline impossible to catch because they teleport the moment. If you try to attack them and weaken them, they'll teleport before you can even go anywhere. So you have to either throw a Pokeball and hope that they'll get caught without any damage done to them, or do a little bit of damage, hope that their teleport fails, and then you throw a Pokeball in the second turn. Um, so I remember, like Abras were over in that spot. If you Once you get out of Mount Moon, right before you get into Cerulean City, that's where you first discover Ekans. That's where the first time I remember seeing Ekans in the tall grass in between Mount Moon and Cerulean City. Um, and obviously, if you go to Lavender Town, that's where you see all the ghost Pokemon. Zubat, the first time you see that is in Mount Moon. Same with I think Geodude, if I remember correctly. Uh, then on the I think those were the ones that I would always remember the most. I actually still remember the locations of the legendary birds.
Mm.
You know, what is it? Zapdos is in the power plant, which isn't kind of like it's near the, isn't it near the dark cave or whatever? It's like on the
Yeah,
right
it's
side of the
Yeah,
kind of
map.
off to the side.
it's a completely
Yeah.
optional area.
Yeah, and Articuno's in the, I forget what is it called, the ice cavern? It's in the middle of the ocean. You need surf to get to it. I forget the specific thing that it's on, but you need surf to get to it if I remember correctly. And I believe Moltres is on Cinnabar Island in the right.
In the
Yes,
original
the
version, he got moved
burn.
for the remakes.
Sorry, say that again.
He's there in the original version. He got moved for the remakes.
Okay, yeah. I see. Like I said, I've only ever played the original, so a lot. I am so far removed from. I have a bunch of other Pokemon games. I just haven't really touched them, and I really need to. I need to really get on that. But yeah. So for me, like the things that really stick out to me in this is just the all the variety of different Pokemon and being able to find them all over the world. So I think it's more of a combination of what Mono said and the variety of Pokemon, like the world building combined with all the different, like I can remember, like I was saying, I can remember specific locations of honestly not amazing Pokemon. Like Ekans isn't anything spectacular, but I remember coming out of Mount Moon and be like, oh shit, this is where I can get an Ekans, and just being so excited that I finally found one. Um, and then I would, and you were mentioning before, Mono, about how like the Diglets are ruining the caves, so that's why you have to completely skip over. I think it's Saffron City at first. Um, you have to completely skip. You like go underneath that in like the underground tunnel or something, and you come out the other side and you make it into Vermilion. But to go to another city later on, Snorlax is blocking the way, and you have to get the Poke Flute. Do you remember where you get the Poke Flute from? I forget.
Who gives you the Poke Flute? I remember there are two Snorlaxes.
Remember.
Yeah, there is two of them. There's one.
Yes.
Because you get two chances to catch one.
Yeah. Because the one, there's no way you can really catch it. So then the second one, you better have a bunch of Ultra Balls, or if you use the missing no glitch, you can duplicate the Master Balls and just have infinite number of them.
Oh, I believe Mr. Fuji gives you the Poke Flute in Lavender Town after you clear out the rocketing Pokemon Tower.
Oh yeah,
that's what it is. That's what it is. Thank you.
The darkest location in Pokemon.
Right? But yeah, it just that's kind of what I ended up loving about these original games. So what I want to move on to next here is I want to talk about strategy, like our ideal party makeup and all that stuff. Like what type of Pokemon did you all gravitate towards? What were some of your favorites? What did your overall party composition? How much did you try to lean into specific types? Bill, I want to start off with you, and I'm going to vamp a little bit longer so you have a little bit of time to brainstorm, and I'm not putting you on the spot, but what are some of your Pokemon? What Pokemon would you choose to be in your party members, and how would you strategize with them? Like what types of TMs? And I actually, while you're thinking real quick, I guess I should explain what TMs and HMs are. TMs and HMs are basically ways to teach your Pokemon different moves. Each Pokemon can only learn a total of 4 moves, and 4 moves total. So if you want to teach them something else, whether it's by them leveling up and them naturally learning something, or you use a TM or an HM and you can teach them an ability using that, you have to pick and choose which of the 4 which moves you want. And I love that. I think that's a really cool mechanic because it makes you strategize and pick and choose what you want to keep. I never went with all the I just dropped all the status ones like Leer and like Sand Attack. The Sand Attack's pretty damn effective. I should probably not get rid of Sand Attack depending on it, but you can usually tank and spank your way through most of the enemies and bosses in this. But TMs, if I remember correctly, I forget what they stand for. Is it TMs is like technical machine? I forget what it is, but you can only use the technical machine. Okay.
Yep.
You can only use those once per Pokemon. And then HMs are like the special abilities like Fly, Cut, Strength, and you can use that as many times as you want as long as a Pokemon is able to learn it. If I remember correctly. Do you guys remember what HM stands for?
Hidden Machine.
Hidden Machine. Okay. Yeah. So, Bill, what is your what would be your ideal lineup now that I've kind of gone through TMs and HMs and a basic overview of that? Who would you choose and what types of moves would you give them?
So my party kind of depends on what starter I pick a lot of the time, but to simplify it, because the majority of the time I always pick Bulbasaur, I'll go with my usual party when I pick Bulbasaur. So obviously Bulbasaur, usually I'll hold on to all his leaf like grass type moves, and then I might keep like the poison powder, sleep powder stuff, just because it's effective for like catching Pokemon. And then I don't know if it's just me or not, but I always like to catch the kind of like generic bird Pokemon that you always find at the start of the game. So I'll usually have a Pidgey or a Pidgeot by the end of the game. Then I get into like the other types. So like Gen 1, I usually pass on a fire type a lot of the time. And I'll go for like because if usually I pick the game I usually pick, the fire types, if you don't pick Charizard, are kind of for that gen. So I usually kind of just will pass. Water types, it depends on my mood. If I feel like waiting, I'll get when we get the Eevee later on, I'll go with a Vaporeon. If I want a water type early on, I'll just get a Magikarp and go through the evolution process of that to get a Gyarados. Electric types are probably, and then I have two go-to electric types usually as well. I'll either pick, if I just want one right away, I'll get Pikachu and just evolve it into Raichu. Or my personal favorite electric type, I'll get a Voltorb and later evolve it to an Electrode. And then I'm thinking for the rest of the party, I usually go with a Drowsy and a Hypno for my psychic type. And let's see here. So 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I think that's the full party there. That's 6.
I lost count.
Let's see. So Venusaur, Pidgeot, Hypno, Vaporeon, Voltorb, or Electrode. That's 5. Oh shit, there is one more. What did I usually pick? God damn it, I can't remember.
Well, if you do remember, feel free to jump in a little bit later. Mona, what about you? What was your ideal party?
I'm trying to remember the first time I cleared Pokemon Blue, my first Pokemon game. I definitely had Venusaur, but it was one of those things where, Venusaur is like level 80 and everyone else is like level 30 or so. So he did most of the bulk work. I really wish I could remember my Elite Four team for the first game. I remember I arbitrarily just threw in Golduck at the end because I think you get him like on Victory Road, and I didn't have like a good water Pokemon. So I thought, well, he's level 40 and he's a water Pokemon, so I'll just throw him in there. So he gets a lot of unearned fame. My other Pokemon did most of the work battling the Elite Four and most of the game. And in my past replays, I think the most recent time I played Gen 1 was Pokemon Yellow on the Virtual Console. And I had a very, not a cheesy team, but kind of a broken team because, well, you have Pikachu, of course. And in Pokemon Yellow, you actually get all these starters as well. So I had like Venusaur, Blastoise, and Charizard on my team, in addition to Pikachu. And then I also got Snorlax because he's a pretty strong normal type. And maybe we'll talk about this later, but you can glitch out and get a Mew legitimately in Pokemon Gen 1. So I also had Mew on my team. So my most recent playthrough was Pikachu, Venusaur, Blastoise, Charizard, Snorlax, and Mew, which is a very broken team to go through the game. But it's also a ton of fun because you have these very strong Pokemon, these very iconic looking Pokemon. And I played through Gen 1 several times, but I'm trying to remember what is my team. I like to switch out a lot. I really like Starmie because, especially in Gen 1, any psychic type is pretty strong. And Starmie can also learn a lot of crazy attacks like Thunderbolt and Ice Beam, which make it very versatile. And I also really liked Kingler for whatever reason, especially in later games. He learns Crab Hammer, which is this absurdly powerful attack that only he could learn. But eventually they introduced some other like crab Pokemon. But there was a time where only Kingler had this unique move, which is kind of funny because it's not a famous Pokemon, I would say, but he has his own special move. And there's a lot of ones that I think are just really great overall because I think Gen 1 has a really strong, like on average, Pokedex. And of course, a lot of people say, oh, this is the best Pokedex. And, the Pokemon after that were no good, which is, not true. But if you look at Gen 1 Pokedex, if you look at the Gen 1, if you do think the Gen 1 Pokedex is the best, I think that's a pretty strong case. And because it is so consistent, if you look at all of them. I'm trying to think of there's just so many good ones. I wouldn't really say the only one I think is like legitimately bad. I'm not a fan of like Mr. Mime or Jinx. I really don't like the humanoid Pokemon. They're just too creepy.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it has a very strong Pokedex, and there's a lot of really fun Pokemon to use. So you could go through Gen 1 many times and have a totally different team, which I think is one of the great advantages. And like going back to like, oh, why is Pokemon so great? If you look at it mechanically, you're making a totally customizable RPG party, which is very unique.
Mm-hmm.
Even something like Final Fantasy VII, of course, you have these archetypal characters, like you have Yuffie, Barrett, and so forth, and you can customize them to a degree with like the materia system. But they still fit at like a very specific role. But here, your entire team is completely customizable. You pick the Pokemon, you pick the moves. In later games, they introduce a lot of more customizable elements, but even in Gen 1, my party and your party are totally different, which is, I think, something that appealed to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Oh, I actually, I remembered the other Pokemon. It was a Primeape.
Okay. All right, that's an interesting. I was not expecting Primeape. There you go. For myself, and then I think we can go into some of the how I want to know how you got Mew, Mono, because that was always something that I was always interested in as a kid, and we can use that to kind of go into school ground rumors and just kind of talk about like kind of the legacy of what Pokemon left. I mean, obviously. There's it's easy to say because it's still going on. I mean, there was just a release. Scarlet and Violet just came out in the fall, right, or something like that.
Yeah,
couple weeks ago, or a month ago, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah, so like it obviously the game left a huge impact because there's still a series. But I think specifically what I want to talk about after the glitches and schoolyard rumors is just kind of talk about like what it happened in the late 90s and early 2000s with Pokemon, like how much it just like exploded. Because I think that warrants at least a little discussion. But for my own personal group of 6, I'm kind of with you, Mono, where my group was all over the place. I didn't really have anything solidified. I started with Squirtle, because like I said, if I was going with the yellow version, I would go for one of the Nidorans because they learned Double Kick, which destroyed Brock's rock types. I would always end up with like Nidoking or Nidoqueen. So I would always go with one of those in that game because that would help Pikachu get through the rock type Pokemon, and then obviously Pikachu would destroy Misty and Cerulean with the electricity thing. But for Gen 1, I would always go with Squirtle, probably Pidgey, and evolve him all the way up to Pidgeot, Pidgeot, or however you pronounce it, Pidgeot. I'd probably go actually with the Pikachu and Raichu just because I always loved Pikachu. I know they're not the best. Like once you get like the mythical birds, I'll say Lapras, but Moltres, Articuno, and Zapdos. There's your electricity and fire Pokemon for you. If I was looking for grass, I actually really liked Gloom and Vileplume. I thought those were really fun Pokemon to have. Trying to think, I always for Psychic, I always was a sucker for Abracadabra and Alakazam. Side note, did you guys see that Kadabra is now legally being like the artist for Kadabra is no longer suing Nintendo? Did you see that in the news recently?
I noticed it. I wonder if they just gave him a lot of money to go away. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, like the issue with that is that Kadabra is kind of based on Uri Geller, which is this like psychic man, or some sort of like, he says he's psychic, he's like a performer, and the Japanese name is like Uri Geller, so it's like his name, and he says, well, they took my idea and they made a Pokemon with it, and they're making all this money, and I should get the money. So he sued for like some sort of like absurd amount of money, and he is right in that at least the name is based on like him. The Japanese name for Kadabra is based on him for sure. I don't know if he invented the spoon thing or like he just popularized it, but I think so. That's part of like his claim is a little flimsy, where it's like some other people came up with like the mind bending spoon thing. And I don't know exactly like the settlement or what happened, because Kadabra is still in the games. but he's not in the trading card game for
That's
whatever
so
reason.
weird.
But I think he said like, oh, they dropped it, or he doesn't care anymore, or he probably, it's been going on so long. But I think Kadabra can now reappear in the trading card game, which is kind
Yeah,
of funny
he can.
because of this in the trading card game, there's always this weird loop or this weird loophole where Abra can directly evolve into Alakazam through like his special ability. So that's how they got rid of like there's no Kadabra here, but you can still have Abra and Alakazam.
That's really funny, actually. Just like, nope, fuck you, don't care. Just gonna get rid of him. That's so strange. But, so hold on, I totally lost track. So I would probably go with Squirtle, obviously up to Blastoise, Pidgeot. Probably, I actually probably get like Hitmonchan or Hitmonlee. I want to say I went with Lee because I like the kicks. I don't know why. It was always like hit or miss with it. That would be my fighting type. Then I would go with, honestly, for a water type, a lot of times I would go with for a second water type because I loved Lapras, even though I already had Blastoise. But I don't know if I would actually have Lapras in there. Okay, so Squirtle. I'm totally losing my train of thought now all of a sudden. Or Blastoise, Hitmonlee, for electricity, probably Raichu or Pikachu. I'm trying to think of other electric types that I liked. I know there was like I wasn't the big fan of Magnemite or Magneton. Voltorb or an Electrode were kind of boring to me. Trying to think for fire, what would I go with for fire? I think like you, Bill, I didn't really go with fire all that much, especially because you don't really get fire Pokemon. Like, you can't find them until late game. You don't get them till Cinnabar Island. So it was like by that point you're almost done the game. Like, you can get fire Pokemon prior to that. Obviously if you choose Charmander as your starter, but I don't know. It just
or if you got
Gloom.
an Eevee and went with Flareon,
Yes.
but
Oh, fuck. I'd probably
if you
go.
if you pick Flareon, you're doing it wrong. So
Who is Flareon the weakest evolution?
Out of the three, yeah.
What's the strongest? Is it Vaporeon?
No, it's Jolteon usually.
Yep.
Jolteon, really?
And Jolteon can learn Pin Missile, which is a bug move. So, like back in the day, of course, Mewtwo is like the strongest Pokemon. So you're thinking, how can I top Mewtwo? And like one loophole people figured out is that, Jolteon is fast, and he learns Pin Missile, which is a bug type attack, which is super effective against psychic Pokemon. So even though it's very weak, it is some sort of like Mewtwo counter a little bit.
Huh.
That's partially why Blue has because he in a yellow, your rival character picks gets the Eevee rather than the Pikachu, and I think it depends on something, but usually I swear every time I play, he always has a Jolteon by the end of the game.
Yeah, it depends on, I think, the second time you fight him. If you win, lose, if you win or lose, that determines, well, I guess there's 3 EVs. But yeah, it determines on like what happens in the second battle. I think if you beat him, he brings out like, the Jolteon. Yeah, which is like, it's like even towards your Pikachu, theoretically. And then if you lose to him, he will have like a Vaporeon, which is of course weak against your Pikachu. I don't know how he gets to Flareon, but there's some way he does. I think if you don't battle him the second time, because it's an optional battle, then he will get the Flareon. So yeah, that's the 3 ways. So that's a very clever idea.
See, I always beat him, so it was just always Jolteon.
Yeah, I think that's much cooler as well. You're electric versus their electric.
I like that. I think I'd probably end up going with Jolteon over Pikachu. So we have Squirtle, Jolteon, Gloom / Vileplume, Hitmonlee. I need 2 more. I'd probably go for like, in terms of like a ground type. I don't know why I always like Diglett and Dugtrio. I always like those. So we'll go with that. And you know what? Fuck it. Let's just go with Lapras because I don't know what else to do. My strategy was this is why I'll never play Pokemon competitively in any stretch, because my strategy in the games was get Blastoise / Wartortle or / Squirtle, whatever. Teach it Mega Punch, and then don't look back. You never need to change Pokemon. All my other Pokemon, you just level up Blastoise all till you, as high as you can until you get experience all, like, towards the end of the game, and then you put in the team that you want, and everyone just shares experience, and you level up from there, and it's great. It's not really the smartest strategy, because, like I said, Mega Punch just ruins everything. It was wonderful. I loved. It was one of my favorite things to do.
That sounds like Razor Leaf for Venusaur.
It's OP on everything. It's great. So let's go in real quick to some of the school. One of my favorite aspects of this, and I feel like the last time I experienced this was with Pokemon Go, the schoolyard rumors. If you go here, I heard if you go to this place and this pixel and you get in this fight, blah blah blah. And the biggest one is how to get Mew by moving the truck in Vermilion City. If you could use strength on the truck, if you could find a way to get up there and use strength on the truck, you could get Mew somehow. And I don't believe that's actually true.
No.
How do you get Mew, Mono?
Fun fact though about the truck thing. In Fire Red and Leaf Green, they actually, if you do somehow get strength and move the truck, they put a lava cookie under it just as a little joke.
I love it. Mono. So I gotta know, Mono. This is last time I played this was over. No, well, it's been less than this, but I started playing this game over 20 years ago, and I still don't know how the fuck you get Mew outside of the special. They would hold those events that as long as you showed up, they would unlock Mew for you on your cartridge.
Yes, there is like a legitimate Mew glitch. Of course, I also remember like the schoolyard talk about how to get Mew. There was like dozens of rumors. The most famous, of course, being the truck, the Vermilion City truck rumor. And by the time I learned it, I already passed Vermilion City, or I couldn't access that. So I was always hoping, like, oh, I wish I could like get that truck. Or I would ask my friend who's like playing it now. It's like, oh, go to Vermilion City and do it. And he actually did it for me. And he says like, oh, there's nothing there. So I was a little disappointed. And it was actually like years later, people discover like a legitimate Mew glitch. I don't know exactly when, but definitely past like Gen 1's prime. And it's an extension of like the trainer fly glitch, which is something similar to how you glitch out like missing no.
Yeah.
Gen 1 in particular is loaded with a lot of glitches, not ones that you would experience through normal gameplay. But if you know what you're doing, you can like activate them. And I don't know the exact step one by one, but the idea is that depending on because the trainer fly glitch is when you fly away, like when a trainer activates battle with you, like when that exclamation mark goes up on their head, you can actually like pause the game and fly away. And this will cause like the memory to like kind of mess up a bit. So the way I did it through the Pokemon Yellow, and you don't need to download anything. This is totally in the game. There's a trainer in the earliest. There's several Mew glitches actually, so you can get him like several times or duplicate it multiple times in the game. But the way I did it in my most recent Pokemon Yellow playthrough, and this is the earliest you can get Mew, I believe, is that in Cerulean City, the second gym, you fight a trainer inside Cerulean City Gym, like a specific swimmer. And then what you need to do is that you actually do need to catch an Abra, which is a bit tricky. But if you do get it, it unlocks Mew. So it's worth doing. So you need the Abra and you need to beat that trainer. And through the Nugget Bridge, the place you actually mentioned earlier, Josh, is that you go down and there's a trainer where if they notice you and the exclamation mark pops on their head, you press start and then you teleport away. You just teleport like back to the Cerulean City. And this like changes the Pokemon spawn rates or Pokemon spawn data. And then you just go up back to Nugget Bridge and go like to the right near Bill's home. And I think the first Pokemon you encounter will be Mew, like a level 7 Mew that you can catch in the wild. So it only, what move does it learn? I think it only knows like Pound or whatever. But you can get a legitimate Mew. And you can also do this to get like Nidoqueen in the wild and all these other like wacky Pokemon. But of course, Mew is the like most interesting one. So you can have a Mew as early as Cerulean City, which is, awesome. The unfortunate part is that Mew doesn't really learn a whole lot of moves until like way later. So you have to like use your TMs on him. And ironically, I like used my psychic TM on Mew because he doesn't learn psychic naturally until like level like 50 or so.
Ooh.
But I'm thinking, well, I need this psychic Pokemon to learn some sort of psychic attack. So I'm going to waste my psychic TM on him, even though he learns it like later on.
That's kind of amazing. I had no idea you could get a Mew so early. I'm you know what? I might do that next time I play through the game because that sounds like something fun to try. I think sorry, what, Bill?
Sorry, did you ever fall for the down AB rumor where if you press down AB during the Pokeball catch animation, it'll actually like improve your chances?
Oh yeah, I in fact I fell for that so hard. It's muscle memory now.
Yeah, I still do it. I still do it.
I still do it too. But for me, it was always down B. So there's like different versions of this totally fake rumor. But
it would be funny.
Still do it.
It would be funny as shit if, like, for like the next Pokemon game, they program into it. If you do that, it guarantees you're going to fail to catch the Pokemon. Just as a joke.
Kind of wish they would do that just to troll people like me. I totally forgot about that. It was also if I would do an attack, if I held down the A button, then for like the harder I held it down, the more damage it would do, or something like that. I'm pretty sure that wasn't even like a legit school ground rumor. I'm pretty sure just my friend who had it told me that, just because he thought the same thing. We were in elementary school, we didn't know any better. Or if he did an expert trolling job, which 20 years later, I applaud him. But for me, the only other glitch I can think of is obviously the famous missing no glitch. The missing no actually means missing number, and it's basically you're manipulating the code. You fly to the trainer, the guy who teaches you how to catch a Pokemon in oh my gosh, it's the second city of Viridian. In Viridian City, you talk to him, and then you fly over to Cinnabar Island, and you surf on the coast, and you surf up and down the coast. And basically, I don't know exactly why it does this, but it glitches it out because when you get into a battle, I guess like when you get into a battle, it gives you a random number, and that random number corresponds to which Pokemon that you are going to get in that battle. And the number that it gives you does not correlate to any Pokemon on their list whatsoever. So when it gets there, it just has a glitch. It says missing number, which is what missing no stands for. And I'm paraphrasing this. I don't exactly understand how it works, but the idea is that what's supposed to be a Pokemon there, it's the wrong value, and so it just gives you missing no. And because of you fighting the missing no, you don't want to catch missing no. If you catch missing no, you corrupt your game file.
Some amazing stuff happens though if you do.
Oh yeah, so I've had so many friends, like I would tell them about this, and then they would catch it. I'm like, no, I told you to run away, and then their save file's just screwed. Like you can't. I remember one friend did it, and it was fine for a little bit, but the more he kept playing it, the worse and worse and worse it got. Like it steadily it was like the save file just decayed into just madness.
I remember I'd like find like level like 400 and something like. What Pokemon? It was some really far-fetched. It was like a far-fetched would pop up and be like, it's like, okay, sure, whatever.
I love it. But what was cool is like if you run away from the missing no, then I think it's like the 7th or 8th, maybe it's like the 30th. I don't know. It's a certain number item in your items in your inventory will get duplicated. So what you can do is put the Master Ball or rare candies if you want to use rare candies. But you can put the Master Ball in that slot. So instead of only having one, you'll end up having 99, which at that point, maybe you've already caught 50, maybe you haven't, but you can just wreck. I mean, you don't have to do anything. It's an automatic catch for everything. It's wonderful.
Yes.
And if I remember correctly, because you could do it with rare candies, and rare candies, level up your Pokemon. But from my understanding is that if you use a rare candy to level up your Pokemon, it's not as good as a natural leveling up. Like it doesn't give you as high stats.
They don't get, the stats don't scale as the same way they would if you naturally leveled it up.
That's what I thought. So it's a bad idea because then you're just going to end up with weaker and weaker Pokemon. Like a level 30, a level 100 Blastoise leveled up by rare candies is weaker than a level 100 Blastoise
So
leveled up naturally.
realistically speaking, if you're just playing the game single player, it really doesn't matter. You can rare candy level them up and you're still going to be OP in the game. It's
Yeah.
more for the competitive battling scene, which I'm not really a fan of to begin with, but that's where like the real stat stuff gets really like technical.
I getcha. Is there any other glitches and stuff you guys want to talk about before we just kind of wrap this up with some legacy talk and just kind of talking about what Pokemania was in the 90s?
I'm trying to think of glitches. I know in Pokemon Yellow, the missing no glitch is like different because they fixed the one from Red and Blue. Like I know one of them, it's like literally like there'd just be like a number of the main character's like canon name is Red. He'll just be walking down the screen infinitely, and it's like this really weird like fever dream thing.
See, I didn't even know you could recreate the missing no glitch in Pokemon Yellow. I just thought it was gone, like permanently gone.
Well, it's a completely different missing no glitch essentially.
Okay. Does it even do the same thing?
No, it just breaks the game.
Ah, stupid. Why can't you let me cheat normally?
Well, it's funny because Missing No is actually in like Gen 3 as well. Like you can encounter Missing No in like Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, and Fire and Leaf Green. It's you can't do it naturally. You have to like action replay it, but it's really funny because Missing No in those games is represented by like a giant question mark that like they actually programmed an animation for.
That's wild. All right. Mono, did you have anything? Are you good to, are you ready to dive into the legacy of Pokemania?
Let's dive in.
The legacy of Pokemania, baby. For those who did not grow up in this era, I don't think it can be understated how pervasive Pokemon was. And Pokemon Gen 1, the reason I wanted to end this episode with this is because Pokemon Gen 1 started everything. It started Pokemania, and you can argue that Pokemania never 100% went away because like every single Pokemon game sells like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one, even the bad ones, they sell like crazy. So it goes through different waves of Pokemania, obviously, but I don't think it has ever truly hit the same height as it did in the late 90s, early 2000s until maybe Pokemon Go in 2016. And that was only for a summer versus Pokemania lasted like years. There are music EPs that you can buy, like Be a Master or something like that.
To Be a Master
with the most shitty
like, you don't want to be a master.
Pokemon Master. Though I won't lie, the two songs that came out of Pokemania that were both from the cartoon, mind you. It wasn't like a special thing written for a CD or for a movie or some type of marketing tie-in. Obviously, the theme song. I mean, what that is one of the best theme songs of all time. You can't argue it. And the second song, On the Road to Viridian City.
Both sung by Jason Page.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. I absolutely love On the Road to Viridian City. As a kid, I loved it, but they seldom played it. I didn't know Jason Page wrote a song. I didn't even know. I didn't know who the name of the singer was.
He's actually a YouTuber now, and like he has like a whole series where he just walks around singing. But there's a YouTube composer named Jonathan Young who does a whole bunch of like heavy metal covers of things. He did a whole Pokemon album, and he did like this heavy metal version of the Pokemon theme, and he actually got Jason Page to like guest appear on it.
Oh yeah,
and it is the most wacky thing ever, but it's like freaking epic at the same time. But he did like all the To Be a Master like songs, like he did that one. He did like Double Trouble, Road to Viridian City, like all sorts of stuff.
I love it. I absolutely love it. So I kind of just did a brief overview of Pokemania. Like there's it's one of those things where it's like Pokemon was everywhere, between the trading cards, between the cartoons, manga, between the games, the manga, then all the different like merchandise. Like you could buy your own Pokedexes. You could buy. I remember I still have a book. I borrowed a book from my local library. It was the Pokemon Field Guide, and it was like everything about the original 151. Like just because I didn't have a Pokedex at the, I might have got one when I was older, but anyway, Mono, what do you got? What do you want to talk about Pokemania and the legacy of
Well,
Pokemon
the
Gen
legacy
1?
of Pokemon Gen 1, it was a massive phenomenon, of course, not only in the West, but also in Japan. I wanted to talk a little bit about what is the history of Pokemon in Japan, because it launched in February of 1996. So about 2.5 years before it did in the West, which is something that wouldn't happen today. And it's kind of weird to think about, okay, this was a major Nintendo game, and it took over 2 years for it to hit like its biggest market. But when it came out in Japan, it was like a modest success, but it took some time to build up over and over. It took some time to build up throughout the months. And one thing that was credited for the success of Pokemon in Japan is something we talked about earlier, is like the Mew rumor, in that a lot of magazines published like, oh, actually, there's a secret Pokemon in this game. So a lot of people got curious about this game because of the rumor that there's actually a secret Pokemon hidden in the game. And so it went on to sell and sell and sell. And in Japan, Red and Green were released. And there was another version, Pokemon Blue, which is technically like the third version, ironically, of the Gen 1 Pokemon games in Japan. Originally, it was only through mail order for Koro Koro magazine, which is a famous magazine aimed at kids. So you would have to like write into the magazine to buy this game. And Pokemon Blue is what the Western Pokemon Red and Blue are based on. The sprites that we have in Pokemon Red and Blue in the West are based on the Japanese Pokemon Blue version, because the Japanese Pokemon Red and Green sprites, not all of them, but a lot of them are different. And a lot of them are worse, to be honest.
Yeah, they're downright they're downright fugly.
Pokemon Blue sprites are much, much better.
And even those are still pretty ugly.
Yes. And
because they redrew them again for yellow.
Yes, the yellow ones are quite good. Those look more like the Kintsugi Mori art, because for whatever reason they drew the Pokemon first in the game, like through the sprite maker program, and then Kintsugi Mori drew the art based on the sprites. And they eventually realized, oh, maybe we should draw it on paper first before we put it into the game. And so, 1996 had Red, Green, and Blue, and then I believe 98 was Yellow. So they technically had Yellow before we even got Red and Blue, which is kind of funny.
That's wild.
And then it came to the West. Like when Yellow came out there, we finally got Red and Blue. So we were quite behind. But one advantage to that is that, okay, when it came out in September of 98 in America, by 1999, they already banked up so many games and so much merchandise and so much media, because they had a 2.5-year head start in Japan. So by 1999, they could just unload everything on the West, and like Pokemania started. It's kind of funny to think that Smash Brothers was April 1999 in the West. So Pikachu had only existed in the West for about 6 months, but he was already in Smash Brothers, which is kind of funny.
Wow, that probably helped a ton too, because that game was so popular. And then you add Pikachu and other Pokemon into that, it just adds.
And then we
to
had
Pokemania.
Pokemon Stadium, Pokemon Snap. They came out in like rapid succession. Realistically, in Japan, it was a much longer gap between Red and Green and Stadium and and Snap. But for us, it was like almost every month. It felt like a new Pokemon game was coming out.
And then the trading card game, that was its own like monster in itself.
Yes. And they had the anime like banked up so many episodes. So they were really ready to launch a huge multimedia franchise by the time it came to the West. And for a long time, Pokemon Red and Green was the best-selling game in Japanese history. And it was only dethroned recently by Animal Crossing New Horizons.
Wow, it also
I didn't know that.
extended the life of the Game Boy by like another 3 years.
Yes.
Yes, that I did. Because if you think about it, the Game Boy came out in '89, and was it earlier in Japan?
I think it was '89.
I know it was
in
'89
Japan
in North America,
or maybe '88. But yeah, around that time.
Okay. I can double check on that too. But yeah, Game Boy came out in 89. So to think that Pokemon came out in 98. Yeah, you're right, Mono. It was April
Okay.
of 89 in Japan. Actually, the Game Boy came out one day before I was
Wow.
born in Japan. That is nuts to think about. So yeah, so it came out in 89 and Pokemon came out in 98. So that's 9 years into a console's life
Mhm.
cycle. That
And
is insane.
it's funny too because
Like
the
that
Game Boy
is
was
just
kind of like in like a point where like people were like, "Oh, I guess the handheld thing is over. No one cares about this anymore." And then suddenly this like
mhm.
mega game just like blows up and like suddenly it's completely relevant again.
It's funny too because the Game Boy Color came out the same
Gold and
year
silver.
as
Well, that's
Pokemon
true.
did in
Yeah.
North
Because
America.
it
It came So it just it helped. So it exploded in popularity again. Game Boy exploded in popularity again because of Pokemon. And then they released the Game Boy Color. So of course everyone's gonna be like, oh, so there's a new version of Game Boy and this insane hit title. No, I mean, no wonder the Game Boy Color did decent for Nintendo. I mean, I believe the Game Boy Color was also technically slightly more powerful than the Game Boy, not just because of the color screen, but I think some other it
yeah,
had
that's
just
why
better
like the
hardware
later Game
inside.
Boy Color games were only functioned on the Game Boy Color.
It makes sense because I mean some of those late Game Boy Color games are
Pokemon Crystal is
beautiful.
actually a color exclusive. Gold and
Hmm.
Silver were backwards compatible, but Crystal itself was strictly Game Boy Color.
When I eventually get to Gen 2, then
Mhm.
I will play. I have, like I said, I have Pokemon Crystal. I will play that version, and I'm looking forward to really giving it the old college try. Um, I do think we should start wrapping this up, though. We're getting close to our time limit for this recording session. Are there any final thoughts on Legacy? Bill, Mona and I have been talking the whole time for this. Is there anything you wanted to add to it?
To me, it's just funny how all these different like media branches like spawned from the game, and every single one of them was so different from each other, but yet so similar. The anime
Hmm.
like went off in its own direction and like became its own thing. The card game became like this mega huge thing in its own right. Even like the manga itself, it became like its own ongoing story, which is still going to this day with its own like story arc that differs greatly from the games. And it's crazy how god like 30 years later and like the series still persists in that way that even like even today like you go to a GameStop on a day one Pokemon launch and like the joke like the whole joke about like the target demographic is children but like literally the entire demographic is mostly adults plus children.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
to me I just find it amazing how it's kept going even if like maybe I don't love it as much as I did back in like the early days, I guess I should say.
I am 100% with you on that. When I say I love Pokemon, I loved Pokemon. Gen 1 meant so much to me and it really um I guess this is good like we can this is our final thoughts section like Bill that was I agree with what your final thoughts were like it just it's crazy how this has continued to persist and as much as Gen 1 meant the world to me as a kid because I didn't have access to continuous like handheld generations, I would say up until the Vita and 3DS, I completely missed out on when they were
Mhm.
contemporary. I knew of them. I knew about the Game Boy Advance. I knew about the PSP. I knew about the DS, but I didn't get a PSP really until college. And the same with the DS. And even then, I didn't really touch it all that much because I didn't have a lot of formative experiences playing handheld games. So I missed out on all the Pokemon games. And because I wasn't paying attention to gaming news back then, I had no idea. I remember hearing on the DS, like when I got my DS and someone says, "Oh, I'm looking forward to the new Pokemon game coming out." And I remember being like, "They're still making that?" I was in shock because I hadn't heard anything about Pokemon for decades because none of my friends really kept up with the series either. So it was this perfect storm of no one in my direct vicinity was keeping up with it. It's not like the internet was a huge thing for me growing up. So it's not like I could go online and watch the discourse and read the discourse on the series. Like if it hadn't been for the internet, I guarantee you when Pokemon Legends Arceus came out, I wouldn't have even known it came out without the internet, because it would just, no one in my vicinity read gaming magazines consistently or paid attention to it. So I love that Pokemon has had such a longevity, all stemming from this first generation of the game of Pokemon. And I kind of want to find an excuse to dive into it. So I don't know. It's just, it really is incredible. I think you said it perfectly, Bill. It's just incredible how long this reach has lasted.
Mm.
Is there anything you wanted to add to it, Bill, before I switch it over to Mono, though? Because I guess I kind of forced the transition into final thoughts. So I wanted to make sure I included your final thoughts before I bump it over to Mono.
No, I think that was pretty much all I really had to say.
All right, cool. Mono, final thoughts on Pokemon Gen 1.
Well, Pokemon Gen 1 I think is definitely a classic game. I think many people view it through the lens of, oh, it's a Pokemon game, and then I'm not really into that. But I think anybody interested in gaming history, in retro gaming, and handheld gaming would have a great time with Pokemon. I think it's just a classic game and very evocative of what makes a Nintendo game great in terms of design. And last thing I want to mention is that I live in Pokemon. I live in Kanto, which is what this region is based on. So there are many places in Pokemon Gen 1 that are based on actual places in Japan. Maybe not one-to-one, but especially because the map looks quite similar to the Kanto region in Japan. So a lot of people have kind of thought and looked at it and said, okay, this city is this city. This cave is actually this cave over here, which I think is really cool. And since I live in Tokyo, in the game, Tokyo is mostly a mix of Celadon City and Saffron City.
Yeah.
Kind of two different areas. I think there's some debate about which parts of Tokyo it's supposed to be. But I technically live kind of close or maybe in Celadon City, which I think is pretty cool. And I've always wanted to go to the actual places in Kanto in real life and visit them in like one big journey to make my real life Pokemon journey. I haven't gotten around to it yet, and I don't think maybe I ever will, since I don't know if I have the time to travel through the entire region through several weeks. But maybe one by one, I can eventually knock all of them off my list. I've been to a few, and I've been to a few outside of Kanto in other Pokemon regions. And it's really cool how they translate like these real life Japanese places into the game. It still captures the atmosphere and the feeling. And it's a great feeling to live in Japan and feel like, wow, this is kind of like I'm living in the Pokemon world just a little bit.
That's really cool. When my wife and I make the trek over to Japan, take a flight over, I will have to try the Pokemon tour, as it were, like looking at all the different stops in the region, or for the Kanto region and whatnot. That sounds really cool. I think this is not a great transition or sequitur, but I wanted one final thing I wanted to bring up that I thought was interesting about Pokemon and all Pokemon, but it's obviously it started here in Gen 1. You can trade Pokemon with friends, like I mentioned with the link cable in the beginning, and we also mentioned how there's specific Pokemon in specific games. You can only get there's certain Pokemon exclusive to certain versions, but also to evolve some Pokemon, you need to trade them. I believe you can't get like a Graveler, or no, what is it? It's Geodude, Graveler, and then what?
Golem.
You can't get a Golem without trading, I believe, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. I once again, I think, and I can tie this into legacy of Pokemon real quick, but that aspect of it adds back to the legacy for this reason. Pokemon has always been about connecting people. And I remember when Pokemon Go came out, there was a joke about this, and it really starts with Pokemon. They want you to interact with fellow gamers, with fellow fans of the series. That's the entire reason for Pokemon existing. They like I said in the beginning of the episode, the link cable was really where the basis started. They wanted you to play with other players, to trade and battle. And obviously, even if you didn't want to trade, you could evolve Pokemon that way and trade it back that way, assuming that your friend wasn't going to dick you over. Um, and as the series has progressed on, they just make it easier and more important, and easier ways to interact with other people, as well as just to get out. Because what was it in the DS era? They had the Poke Counter, right, where you could level up your Pokemon just by walking around in real life. Was that something, right?
I think Soul Silver had something similar to that.
Yeah,
It was
it
like,
came in like I forgot the name of it, but it is like this step counter and it's shaped like
yeah.
a Pokeball. And you can transfer your Pokemon into it and get some experience and get some items.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's so as the generations have gone on, the Pokemon in general just keeps trying to push its audience to be like, get out and go meet people. And finally, you get to Pokemon Go. It's like, just get off the fucking couch and go outside. Like every game just feels like it's trying to push you outside, and it ties back to what gave Tajiri the inspiration for this game. Like, it was all about bug collecting, um and going outside and collecting bugs and trading with his friends. So I don't know if it's been this intentional, but it kind of seems that way, because as the series has progressed, it has wanted players to become more interactive with each other, and you get out and meet each other. And it really feels like the legacy of Pokemon, to wrap up this episode, is community. It is building a community of fans that interact and love this series. And while the series passed me over for various reasons, it is one of the things I've always admired about the Pokemon community, is seeing it can be vitriolic at times. I know you see all the online anger when they don't have every single Pokemon in a new entry, or there's a whole bunch of there's drama, but there's drama in every community. But what I always liked about Pokemon is that the focus from the get-go was community. It was meeting up and connecting with people. And that, I think, is I'm it's true. The crazy thing is, as much of as a stretch it may have sounded to start off with talking about the evolution of Graveler to Golem into this big diet, this big rant about Pokemon's legacy as community, it may seem like a stretch, but it's sincere and it's true. It's all about community, and that's kind of what it always has been. So that, I think, is a good place for us to wrap up this episode of Still Loading. Bill and Mono, thank you so much for joining me, guys. I had a lot of fun on this episode. Before we send our listeners off to whatever they're doing next, where can the good people find you? Bill, let's start off with you. What do you got going on, and where can everybody find you online?
So I am currently the host of two podcasts. I have my main one, the Gaming Collecting Podcast. It is a gaming and nostalgia based, gaming and anime, I should say, based nostalgia podcast I host with my sister Alex, where we just talk about a bunch of different games from our childhood, along with like modern titles and random topics every now and then. I also have another project called the 3DO Experience. It's currently on hiatus, but it's a retrospective podcast discussing the Panasonic 3DO and the company behind it.
And listeners, as I said in the final 8 episode, I have guested on that show, and it's a wonderful podcast, and I'm excited to see it when it comes back off of hiatus. I know it can be a little bit hard to figure out programming for that, so I empathize with you. That's got to be tough to figure out what you want to do next with it. But let's move it on over to Mono. Mono, where can everybody find you online, and what do you got to talk about?
I'm the host of Tokyo Game Life, which is a Tokyo-based video game podcast focusing on Nintendo and gaming culture in Japan's capital. You can think of it as a slice of life gaming podcast from Tokyo. Every episode, I have a feature about a place to visit in Tokyo relating to video games, or some sort of feature on a cultural element of Japan. I've had several episodes about Pokemon, especially Pokemon shops to visit in Tokyo, Pokemon Wonder, which is like a nature escape game, Pokemon card collecting in Japan, how you should go through that. So if you're a Pokemon fan, you can search out those episodes. And I've also had Josh on 2 of my episodes talking about our favorite games from last year. So I recommend starting there. So type in Tokyo Game Life in your podcast app. And I'm also on Twitter, where I post pictures from Japan every day. So if you like that, check it out.
I love following them both on Twitter and Instagram because I love seeing all those pictures of stuff that I've never been to Japan. So it's like my way of living vicariously through your Twitter and your Twitter feed and your Instagram feed of going to Tokyo. Yeah. So check out both Bill and Mono. Their podcasts are fantastic. As usual for me, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StillLoadingPod on all of them. If you want to email me, you can email me stillloadingcontact@gmail.com. If you want to support the show, please give it a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or whichever podcasting app you use, because that pleases the algorithm gods and it makes me feel warm and fuzzy, and I like feeling warm and fuzzy. And if you want to support the show monetarily, you can go to patreon.com/stillloadingpod for $1 a month. You'll get all the episodes a few days earlier with better audio quality. For $4 a month, you'll get everything at the $1 level, plus access to 2 bonus episodes a month, which at the time this is coming out, I will have had, this is going to be 2 episodes of my series on going through the Gamer 5, the My Arcade Gamer 5 Portable, which is one of those handheld systems that has 220 games on it, which I guarantee you are all quality. All of them are definitely good. If you want to see what Curly Monkey is like in its sequel, Curly Monkey 2, totally household names, go check out that series at the $4 level. I'm going to be playing all 220 games, usually probably 8 to 10 at a time, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And also at both of those levels, there's a voting rights for helping me figure out other games to cover on the show. I'm going to be doing quarterly polls. The winner of the first poll was Spec Ops: The Line for the PS3, so I'm going to be playing that soon and doing an episode sometime in the next few months. And then I guess if it's quarterly, I guess at the end of March, beginning of April, I'm going to be putting up another poll, so you can be on the lookout for that. And at the $5 level, there's one more level. At the $5 level, you get everything that I mentioned before, plus access to a patron-exclusive podcast called Still Bonding, which when this comes out, there will be 6 episodes of it out. And it's my friend Erica and I, Erica from the Monster Madness podcast, we are bonding over 007, watching all the James Bond movies and doing long-ass episodes on each one. So far, no episode has been under 2.5 hours, so there's a lot of content out there for you. And that is all I got. That's everything for Patreon. So if any of that sounds interesting, please go to patreon.com/stillloadingpod and consider signing up there. The last shout out I have, though, is the Bit by Bit Foundation. The Bit by Bit Foundation is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to put video games and video game consoles in the hands of kids receiving inpatient care at hospitals. So if you want to support them, go to bitbybitfoundation.org and consider donating. And that is all I have for you today. That is it for this episode of Still Loading. Thank you all so much for listening. Bill, Mono, thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks again for having me, Josh.
And I will see you all next time.